In relation to its size, Finland's archipelago sea has more islands and islets than anywhere else in the world. Every island is unique. The landscape varies from barren rocky islets to vibrant villages, and from sheltered coves to the open waters of the outer sea. The archipelago's cliffs and rocks originate from an ancient folded mountain range that was formed when tectonic plates collided. Over time, the mountain range has been eroded by several ice ages. Now, all that remains are the hard rocks that made up its base. The shore-slamming surf and whistling winds keep the woody vegetation at bay and make room for flowering beach plants. Lush leaves and species-rich meadows grow in the nooks and crannies between rocks, on lime veins, and in the shell gravel. The barren rocky islets rising from the sea in the outer archipelago offer birds and seals a place to rest. Rock pools and salt ponds teem with aquatic life. According to folklore, in ancient times the northern coastal areas used to be inhabited by giants, known as Jatulit. Legend tells that the huge boulders and small islands are the work of these giants. The giants had either dropped these stones through a hole in their pocket or had been hurling rocks in a vain attempt to crush a church. The ancient stone structures to be found in the archipelago are also thought to be traces left by giants on the landscape. In high places, stones have been piled up to form burial mounds. They come in many shapes and sizes and have been there for thousands of years. These diverse stone structures are remnants of life in ancient communities, but we are not sure of their exact purposes. People have always sought contact with the life-giving forces of nature. This dialogue has also required the appeasement of great forces. In Finland, labyrinths built of stones are called giants' gardens. A giant's garden usually has 1 or 2 routes that wind through the maze. A folktale from the island of Inio tells that, on the way to Söderby, there is a great rumble to be heard from beneath the ground at the giant's garden, as if there were a large subterranean room down there. The elders have told us that at certain times of the year, the devil opens up the place to clean, and if someone happens to come along just then, they might see the room in all its splendor. It has also been said that sailors built giants' gardens while waiting for favorable winds. The stony labyrinths are also said to have magical properties that bring good luck to fishermen. Life in the archipelago has always required people to adapt to the demanding conditions of its unique natural environment. For centuries, the islanders' way of life was based on close interaction between humans and nature. At first, people visited the archipelago seasonally to hunt and fish. As a place to live, it was far too risky. Although the sea ensured a mild climate, fertile land was scarce. Timber was not readily or sufficiently available for building or firewood. The first people to arrive in the archipelago had a need to understand nature's signs and omens. In addition to the traditional livelihoods of fishing and seal hunting, a knowledge of the area was for a long time the islanders' greatest advantage. Pilots had the task of guiding ships through the difficult waters of the archipelago. Piloting is a profession that has been practiced for hundreds of years. In the archipelago, you're a long way from city centers and services. In the outer archipelago in particular, you had to learn to accept the limitations of your own strengths and abilities. You had to settle for what was available and not rely on support from the community or strangers. You were also far away from the rules of society and supervision from the authorities. Being an islander may have included some degree of disobedience and the sense of being an outlaw. With their so-called beach rights, the islanders gave themselves the freedom to collect any wreckage that drifted onto the shore. Their independent bent flourished, particularly during the Prohibition era. Liquor smuggling was often practiced as a competitive sport with plenty of humor involved. Folklore from Hiittinen tells that one night, while they were on the island of Bengtsa, some fishermen heard a great roaring and banging from the rocks. The very next night the wind whipped up in a mighty storm. The roaring had been a sign from the elves, a warning that meant, get up and get out of there. The village is the foundation of communal life, both in the archipelago and elsewhere. Most of the villages marked in the land registers of the 16th century are still in existence and continue to brighten up the landscape today. Permanent settlement in the challenging archipelago region of southwest Finland dates back to only the 13th century. The form and appearance of archipelago villages varies greatly. On smaller islands, villages have been shaped by natural conditions. Sometimes, the houses have been freely located according to the undulations of the terrain, perhaps to shelter them from the wind. On other islands, the main buildings have formed an arc around the village harbor. Although the sea ensures a mild climate, the forces of nature are powerful in the archipelago. The wind has always been harnessed by shipping, and its power was also utilized by mills. Although people learned to exploit the mighty forces of nature, they also had to appease them and adapt to them in a variety of ways. When in distress at sea, people may have given promises to God that were later symbolized by votive ships that were donated to churches. These ships were hung from the ceiling of the church, and they may also have been donated ahead of a dangerous voyage in order to guarantee safe passage. Often, these donations were also a memorial to those who had drowned at sea. The demanding archipelago attracts innovative freedom seekers and lone wolves. Newcomers are often creative and entrepreneurial. They are tempted by the silence and serenity, the distance from urban life, or life at the edge of something greater than themselves. In addition to the livelihoods afforded by the sea, grains have also been grown on the larger islands. Although the larger islands provided sufficient land for arable farming, crops grown elsewhere were scattered across a number of smaller islands. Particularly fertile land was created by slush burning. A slush and burn area may initially have been farmed and then later used as pasture. Wheat was grown for people to eat, whilst oats were mostly used as fodder for animals. Soil that was unfit as arable land may have been suitable for grazing. Animals have traditionally been swum to pasture on other islands or transported there by boat. Villages had a joint rotational grazing system that determined when and on what island each person's animals could graze. The things that make the archipelago's nature unique are largely man-made. Pastures, coastal meadows, forest grazing areas and wooded meadows are the most endangered habitats in the archipelago, as they need humans to maintain them. When it comes to managing the archipelago's traditional landscapes, the majority of the work is still done by grazing animals. In early summer, the sheep are shipped to the islands where they graze until the autumn. The number of permanent residents has been falling steadily since the 1920s. Now, 100 years later, there are even fewer year-round residents, yet more people than ever visit during the summer. Cities provide work, services and amenities, and life in the archipelago has become mostly seasonal. Whereas 1,000 years ago, the archipelago attracted people to fish and hunt seals, now it entices them to enjoy the sun and sea. Tens of thousands of tourists visit the archipelago sea every year, and spending the summer in the archipelago is particularly popular. The archipelago sea is subject to the same environmental threats as the Baltic Sea in general. The chilly Baltic Sea is a shallow inland sea. In spite of its small size, the Baltic Sea has a large catchment area. About 90 million people live in the region, which extends into the territory of 14 countries. Human activity has a major impact on the state of the Baltic Sea, and it is one of the worst polluted seas in the world. Eutrophication is still the most wide-scale environmental problem in the Baltic Sea. These days, nutrient emissions from agriculture are the main culprit. In spite of these challenges, the Baltic Sea region can also be considered a success story in resolving environmental issues. Seabirds on the brink of extinction, and in particular sea eagles, were restored to healthy populations by restricting the use of herbicides, for instance. The Baltic herring is also edible once more. There is a clear operating model evident in the way environmental issues have been tackled in the Baltic Sea. When a problem has been detected in good time and its root cause has been identified, a solution has always been found. Usually, this solution has also required increased political pressure in order for decisions to be made. The record-breaking algae blooms of summer 2018 prompted our decision-makers to initiate an intensified program of measures to stop eutrophication. Extensive efforts to tackle the eutrophication problem have now begun in Finland, and we can be optimistic about the future of the Baltic Sea.